Hello, everybody, and welcome to the LJL Officially Unofficial Podcast, episode 27. Gentlemen, we've did it. We're now probably 1 year older somewhere in the world, doing something, I don't know. This is the LJL Officially Unofficial Podcast, bringing you the only English content around the LJL, because we are still the best, and I don't care if other people do it. I'm going to keep saying stupid stuff like that. I'm your host.
If you're annoyed, you can come talk to us on our podcast.
And on our Discord, overly on our terms.
We'll set up fight night. It's going to be great.
Yeah, I
love as soon as I do that, the sirens go off outside.
I know that's the reason we don't talk about Fight Club. That's what happens. We mentioned it in passing, and you see what happens.
The Popo.
First rule, man.
The Popo. I am one of your three hosts or co-hosts, Alex, otherwise known as Executive by MaskedSwan, and I'm joined by the laudable man himself, Samuel. That is Initia1ise Hapgood. Sir, welcome to the podcast.
Welcome.
And thank you. I am indeed welcome. Thank you, sir. Thank you. And we have our other co-host here, our color commentator, and that is Alex, otherwise known as Nymaera. Hapgood, the commendable man himself. Welcome to the podcast, sir.
Oh, well, I much appreciated. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, sir. Oh, yes.
Can we potentially talk about replacing him with that beautiful seal behind him? I think that's probably going to provide better content.
I mean, it's an adorable pillow, but in this hot weather, I don't want anything near me personally.
Touché?
No, I actually have to take the entire duvet and everything off. I just starfish.
Yeah.
Get as much cold fabric on me as possible.
I put it back on to make it look prettier in the background, but that was all on the floor. Like, there's no way. Like.
Oh yeah. This is not normal. This is just like I move things from one place to another, and that's it.
Yeah. It's difficult.
So Initia1ise. I vaguely mentioned what this podcast is, but really, what is this podcast?
We cast the VCS in English because we're better. No, we are the. We cover the. We cover that. Al's just dying in the corner of this one. No, we cast the LJL in English, and we kind of provide some extra, what we do was extra content, I suppose the way to. We add some spice, some additional depth to a world that Riot don't really provide any, and so we kind of fill in the gap, particularly for a Western audience where everything being in Japanese normally don't really get to understand anything that happens. So hopefully we can provide a little bit of a way into the whole of Japanese League of Legends.
Oh, and if we're doing this much content ourselves, surely Papa Riot's on our side, right, Nymaera?
No.
Oh.
No.
What does that mean then for us?
It means that we do all of this out of our own initiative. This is not supported in any way by Riot or any of its affiliates, or anyone connected to them. This is just our own little outreach. However, if they would like to bring us under their wing or give us a bit of a helping hand or anything like that, we of course always are open towards communication. We'd love to do more with this in the future, and if we can do that in a more official capacity, that would be great.
I always did appreciate the Kaiser Chiefs, and I'd like to predict a Riot sponsorship with this particular podcast.
He's fired already. It's okay, Riot. He's gone.
And Riot will never talk to us, and it's all my fault.
DMs are always open as well for anyone who is willing to ask us questions or interested in information around the LJL, as we are starting to become some of the most knowledgeable people in the English-speaking world around
for a while now.
The region. Oh, yes, and that also does mean this podcast is our own views and opinions and does not represent the LJL Officially Unofficial Cast. This might be a podcast with a similar name to it, but we are far more of our personalities and personal predictions, and we might flame, and that's okay, because we can on our podcast. This podcast also goes out on all audio streaming platforms, as well as the YouTube video, which is where a lot of people do check it out. So if you are interested in finding it through it, you can find us on Spotify, not SoundCloud, because fuck SoundCloud, as well as multiple other places. And you can also find all of our social media handles at MaskedSwan, at Initia1ise for the man in the middle, and over on the far left at Nymaera, as well as at LJL_officially_official, or just LJL official. /LJL English. You'll probably find us through that circumstance. Gentlemen, our tiebreaker match has happened. Our last podcast, we hadn't had a tiebreaker match. We have now since had a tiebreaker match. We now know the bracket and the standings. The overview now for round one has been confirmed. We know our matchups. We've got our thoughts around it. This is what the podcast is mostly going to be covering, as well as also giving our vague predictions for the bracket moving forward, and then covering our questions at the end from our lovely community themselves. Gentlemen, the first match that we will be witnessing when we go into playoffs, and this was picked by CGA themselves. Crest Gaming Act facing off against the Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks Gamings. This is definitely, if you look into this, an interesting match for one of these teams.
It's going to be very skirmish heavy. It's going to be messy. It's going to be so messy. I'm not surprised CGA picked the Hawks over Burning Core. I'm not.
Neither am I.
So why is that?
Okay. So I'll start this one, but I think Nymaera can go definitely more in depth. But the baseline is the Hawks' strength are Honey basically able to get a big CS advantage in just laning fundamentals, and Arya. Sorry, not Arya, and Dasha. Look at where CGA's strengths are, and it is the mid jungle 2v2. It's Arya being able to destroy people in mid lane. It's Gango and Grendel being able to play front foot in the bot lane and run over. Look to the last match the Hawks and CGA play. Grendel and Gango really put Honey and Pooh in the dumpster. And I think this is just a poor matchup for the Hawks in that where they want to play through, they play against an even higher strength opposition in terms of just role discrepancy.
Sure.
So I'm of the opinion that the Hawks. So I think I think I might have said this in pre-prediction. I can't remember if this is Burning Core or the Hawks. I think it was the Hawks I said this about. They're kind of CGA light. They kind of want to do. They kind of want to do the same thing that CGA want to do, right? Where they have a very strong mid laner. They have some carries which love the skirmishing, love their carry potential.
True.
And they just keep rolling over and over around the mechanical prowess, and it's not necessarily as clean cut as some like Sengoku when they play around objectives, but because they play around desync objective timers and they fight in the slightly unexpected times, they can come out with some pretty huge performances. We saw that a couple of times. I mean, they went 2-0 in the last week until the tiebreaker came in. Of course, then they fell down to DFM, which is why they're in this matchup, and they'll be kicking themselves because they could have avoided CJ with a tiebreaker win there, unfortunately. I think they're just worse pound for pound than CJ mechanically, and they don't necessarily have the same style of play like someone like V3 or Sengoku can do to really put CGA under the cosh in a macro sense and put bot lane behind or something like that.
I mean, it's also worth noting that CGA going into this matchup are 2-0 versus the Hawks, right? And in two completely different ways of really kind of closing it. They had two different carries, which means they can play through different players. And where do we see the games kind of going for the Hawks? As if you just look at this objectively from results-based orientated thinking, this looks like a 3-0 for CGA, right?
I'll put this out. For the Hawks, they've got probably 2, maybe 3 things going for them on a base level before, things like drafts and stuff come into play. Namely, I rate Tussle over Yoshi. I think Tussle's actually pretty good. Unica. Sorry, thank you. Yoshi is the reason was I was looking at Yoshi's solo queue account recently. That's why. Yeah, Unica. Thank you about that.
That's right.
But I do rate Tussle over that. So that's one place where they can maybe find something. You can set up a discrepancy through the jungle. And 2, largely CGO don't play through top side, and that means that Aramik being kind of a bad weak side can be alleviated, and that might offer some more stability, which I think the Hawks generally have a little bit more of than CGA. They tend to play with a little bit more stability.
Can I ask you a question based on that then, because of the Aramik thing? So we know that Aramik and Nap love to just kind of scale into team fights. Who do you think has been better at that from ahead? Because I know Aramik's been good from ahead, but whereas Nap's normally done it from behind. But if they go from ahead because they're playing weak, both teams are playing weak side, top side, who do you guys think benefits more from that?
I think probably Nap, but largely because I think I like Nap's weak side champions quite a lot. That said, the fact that Aramik won't be a weakness is an upside for Hawks, hopefully assuming they're not getting played to top side, which is something for them.
I think Aramik's going to get thrown in the dumpster I think Nap's
that's fair.
absolutely
That's
going
fair.
to just run over it. He's been maybe quietly the third best top laner, sometimes second best top laner in the league.
I think, actually,
and-
consistently, I think maybe even second or first.
Yeah, he's
That's a
been-
hot take. Hot take.
In his
but,
particular
yeah.
in his particular style, I kind of agree. Like he is the best weak side top laner in the league.
But the thing is, he can also play carries, which is just
can play
something...
Wukong.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he can.
he does play good Wukong.
He can also play Aatrox and stuff. Like, these are champions that are high in priority, and he can play them to a high level. And
And his Renekton's good too.
yeah, and that's the one of the most played champions globally at the moment. So, especially coming onto the new patch, which we're going to be on, which is going to be playing a part of it. And yeah, I'm really unsure for the Hawks, honestly.
Because this is my read on Naps. I don't think he's necessarily your traditional carry top laner. Like, he's not a Camille or a Fiora, but he is a carry in the sense that he's a fantastic initiator. If he
Yeah.
can find his way to
Onto
start a
Ornn,
fight
whatever.
on something like a Wukong, on an Ornn, there are few top laners in the league who are as good at starting a fight and finding a good mid to late game fight.
I wanna-
than Nap is right now.
Cast your mind back, guys, to the tiebreaker in spring. Remember when Nap... Well, so CJ looked pretty dire at that point. It was not
They
looking
did.
good.
They were
And
losing
then
a
the
lot of games,
tiebreaker was such a watershed moment for them to really find their gears again. And Nap played Gangplank, which I don't think he played the entire split. He hasn't played it this split either. But he was out... He solo killed Rayfaki several times that game.
Didn't he?
And...
That's big.
It's big. So I'm like... And also, like, remember, Nap didn't have a single solo kill in the regular split. That split, and then he comes into playoffs and solo kills like Cog in the first round of playoffs, and he's doing that to Rayfaki in the tiebreaker match and stuff. I think Nap has another gear he can go up to too, whereas I'm not sure about Aramek.
Oh, I think
like-
Nap he's still got champions in the back pocket. He's still got his Urgot. He still has things like
True,
the
true.
Trogath he can play at the moment. He can also just play Scion. Like, and he's got such a diverse champion
All of
pool
which are good. All of
to
which are
pick
good.
I mean,
from.
like-
He can play Kennen. He can play Silas. He can play Wukong. He can play Aatrox, and his most played champion in professional play is Aatrox and Ornn. Like, he can play the typical tanks that you just leave and you just go away from them.
Yeah.
Set as well included partly into
Bye-bye.
that. But you can also have him on a carry, which I think is
like,
just up and up versus Aramek personally.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, this split, he has basically played Ornn, Renekton, and there was something else.
Wukong.
I forgot. Wukong. Like, those are the ones he's actually indexed into. He's got 5 games on Ornn,
Yeah.
3 games on the other 2. That said, we know he plays other stuff. It's just like, what is his role been within the team? And it's largely been teamfight initiator, left to weak side. And that's partly because of how CGA somewhat has to play, because particularly their bot side refuses to play weak side.
Yeah.
But put it like this, because remember in their tiebreaker match spring again, they played like Vladimir mid, which actually, and Ari's not gone back to that this split, and it's
No.
something which he played in spring very well, I would say. He had
he
like
did.
he had that game
He's a
versus
great
Sengoku
Baron.
where like solo killed him sideline and they're still Baron. But if you have like I think that CJ has some more stuff left in the tank. I know that this is a lot of speculating, but I just want to set the record straight in terms of like, hey, CJ can do some different stuff. Watch out for it. So that's something which the Hawks will have to look into.
So something that Initia1ise highlighted on, and I want to kind of go back to, is the bot lane. And I think that's the only part where the Hawks could find a huge advantage. And part of it is through Honey on Caitlyn. And
Yep.
I could... And it's a champion that Gango hasn't got a shitload of games on. He's got games on, but not shitloads of games on. Whereas Honey, I'm pretty sure, if I remember rightly, is pretty solid on Caitlyn. And Caitlyn's seeing a huge rise in popularity. I also think Grendel having 2 or 3 good games is still probably their second weakest member on the team. Whereas I think Pooh is actually just being stronger in a lot of spots for the Hawks and finding ways that the Hawks can prevail in certain games.
So remember Honey only started playing this year. He's not
Exactly,
actually got
yeah.
a professional Caitlyn game, but he's a good solo queue player, and it is a very intuitive champion in terms of that. It's about how it slots into the team mentality at that
that's
point.
huge, yeah.
I think of the series we could possibly get in playoffs, this might be the one with the lowest Caitlyn priority, actually.
I mean,
thinking about it.
Hilariously, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
you say that, and yeah, there is also a world where CGA just index into you. go
Unless Arya
Caitlyn-
plays Caitlyn mid.
well, I'm just saying, like, Gango and Grendel going Caitlyn Bard, and then Arya and Unica just spending their whole time playing around bot. It's a world which would happen. It happened the last time the Hawks played, because Gango leveled the Hawks. Part of that was off a bad level 1, and they snowballed really well from that. And that's also just partly how CGA's bot lane play. They are super feast or famine. They're either like gods amongst men who just pick every fight, win every fight, or they pick every fight and lose every fight.
I could also just see them both sides just banning Caitlyn, just like
agree.
R1 ban Caitlyn,
absolutely.
and just not even dealing with it.
So CGI are kind of crap in the early game, and if you give the enemy team a Caitlyn, that just makes things even worse, because normally you have to have a very good early game and upset the Caitlyn to really make her sweat. So I think that CGA should really just ban Caitlyn or pick it. You can't let the enemy team have it.
They will have side selection, which is obviously really important.
Yes, I was going to talk about that later in regards to the whole bracket, but in particular in this series too, and in any series CGA is on, I think that they want to be red side banning Caitlyn and having counter pick for mid lane. I think they need that. I think that's really huge for them.
I'm looking at like what has Caitlyn lost against, and like people pick Ashe into it, and Ashe is still losing because Caitlyn's got a 55% win rate. The one that's got a decent win rate versus Caitlyn in the minute is the Jhin, 56.
Gango plays a mean.
Gango plays a mean
Jhin.
So
also, I think
that's another thing that CJ
when you have an assassin mid laner, it gives you a lot of anti-Caitlyn potential. If you're playing Orianna, she never reaches Caitlyn. If you play LeBlanc, Echo, Zoe, there's a chance you just nuke the Caitlyn. And I think that maybe
Dasher
CJ
plays a good Echo.
Dasher plays a good Echo too. Yeah, that's true. And actually, both these mid laners are probably the best anti-Caitlyn mid laners. Although most of the time it's a top lane. Most of the time it's a top lane flank, which really just makes Caitlyn sweat.
Yeah, and that's part of my concern, I think, for the side of CGA. They need to have pretty good front-to-back team fights against the Hawks, because I do feel like the Hawks, the one or two things they do have going for them is Dasher, who will just not give a shit. Partly about his own
Mid lane's
team.
Gonna be so fun. Mid
Mid lane's going to be an absolute bloodfest, and you could either see Dasher going 5-0 over Arya, or Arya going 5-0 over him, and it's like, yep, that was the game, lads.
Like, I think it's fair to say that we favor Arya over Dasher. Just and largely speaking, I think by the sounds of this conversation, we favor CGA, and there's no surprise in that with where things have ended up through the season in general. But it's not like the Hawks don't have areas they can attack, and and people like Tussle and Dasher are very talented, have got experience and champion pools which could attack the right areas of CGA. And this is always the problem with CGA in general, is like, you can never count them out, you can never entirely count them in, because there is always a world where they just int.
Well, gentlemen,
like, flat out.
Gentlemen, I think this is worth noting. This is a team that we almost all had pegged to be a lock for second place. They are not second place. They went 0-2, coin flipped their way into 2 losses, and then are now in playoffs. Yeah. And they're in the lower bracket, which means they are forced to now go through 2 rounds where if they went at minimum 1-1, which they should have done, in all seriousness, they should have forced a tiebreaker match versus Sengoku and then been coin flipping their way through that. That's how we should have had it. We didn't get to do that. Me and Initialize at 4 in the morning didn't have to cover that one. I'm partly okay with that, so that's good for us. But is that a problem for CGA moving forward throughout the bracket? And is that also going to affect how some of these games might go?
Yeah, it's going to be a problem for them. They need red side. I think blue side CGA against a top tier team is going to really struggle. The question is whether in second round, if they make it past that, if the team coming from the other side, either DFM or Burning Core, count as a top team on their current form. Maybe DFM do, maybe they don't.
So, Nymaera, for anyone that just plans to go looking into the stats, I'm just going to ask you that question. Currently, CGA have more wins on blue side than they do red side. So why are you going like this? Just so you can give some more information on why you perceive CGA have to be on red side.
I think that the better teams in the league can outdraft them very, very hard from blue side. I think that if CGA are playing against a worse team and they don't get red side, it doesn't matter as much. I need to actually have a look into who they lost against on those sides. But just in my mind's eye, when we saw DFM beat CGA, they completely banned out Arya. Completely banned out Arya, and then just made him... They put him in, and they had counter pick up until red 5 onto mid lane pick as well. Okay. That's kind of sucky. And then there's another really telling game in the V3 game. In V3 when they lost in the first round robin. When you saw that the map could get set up into vertical jungling on bot side being weak side, so you could just hyper gank CJ's bot lane who were on blue side, because you can go through Tri-Brush and go through that one brush. And you can't do that to a team on red side so easily because it's much easier to gank a blue side bot lane. Geographically, it's just much less safe. And a team like V3 and maybe DFM and maybe Sengoku, maybe not so much. I'm not so sure about that. But a couple of teams might be able to exploit that. So I think that if CGA do not get side choice and they're on blue side, that might just lead to kind of a de facto loss. Whereas if they have side choice in games 1, 3, 5, they might be able to just pick red side and win through that because those glaring obvious those weaknesses might not be there.
So may I then ask the question to both of you? Because of what Nymaera said, and initially you can give your own thoughts on this.
Yeah.
I'm partly going into interview mode because I think this is far more interesting.
It's fair.
Sure, no.
Are we going to be having 5 games then, Nymaera? And then later on, Initialize. I want Nymaera's first thoughts, and then I want you to respond, Initialize.
Versus the Hawks, no. I don't think they have the capability to set up the map in the right way.
So they're not winning blue side, is what you're saying?
I don't think they're... I think they will win one game on blue side. I think they will lose the other one on blue side. I am predicting a 3-1 here. I think that... CGA will win one game on blue side. That's what I mean. And then the other one they will lose. That's what I mean. So Hawks might get lucky once and use that to their advantage. I think that the coach they've got in at the end of the split might help them in regards to that. Didn't help them versus DFM with the tiebreaker. We will throw that out there. I think that this is more relevant later into the bracket. And potentially them not getting second place because of this last week has scuppered their playoff chances because of that.
Yeah.
Okay. Initialize, any responses to everything Nymaera just said?
Okay.
There's a lot to unpack.
So I think Nymaera's probably got a pretty good read there, and I think his reasoning is pretty on it, and I tend to agree. I think it probably will be a 3-1 in favour of CGA. I just think there's a raw talent discrepancy, even if the coach has come in and made Hawks more stable. I just think the CGA will pick fights and just be better mechanically within them. That said, there is also something to be said for part of the reason I think that CGA could find themselves a little bit less powerful than they were early in the split is globally, mid lane champion pools have indexed more towards control mage play. We are seeing a lot more Azir, a lot more Orianna, a lot more Corki. That's great for carrying late game team fights, and don't get me wrong, CGA are not bad in those spaces, and hell, we've seen what Nap and Gango can do in those spaces. It's less counter pick favourable though. They aren't as kind of harder counter picks to certain other mid lane champions. And that might hurt Arya a little.
I would give a caveat to that because Arya has such a large skill discrepancy and champion pool to normally fit himself into a comp where he can always get solo kills. So, for instance, if you look at DO1 over the BCS, which is not incomparable to the LJL in terms of it's a tier 2 region.
Or CJ specifically.
And actually, GARM as a team over in the VCS are relatively similar to CJ because Skirmish Heavy with a very good mid laner. There's a lot of other stuff you can unpack there. I think that Levi, incredible jungle difference, shit like that. I think that we might see Arya pick up stuff like Trist or Lucian, very, very strong AD mids, which are very different from those control mages. So I don't think it's as clean cut as that.
Okay.
Yes. So yeah, he's got a point there, and there is definitely room for that to happen. I would not
that
be
you
surprised.
don't have a point, but
I'm just saying on global trends, there is more of a trend towards control mages. That's not largely what CGA have wanted out of Arya. They've wanted things like, I suppose the closest being to something like that would be like a Zoe, where
he plays as Sam.
Well, he does play as Zoe, but he's only played the one game this split.
He plays at one games of a lot of champions, mate. It's only 2 or 1.
Exactly.
So.
He's played one game of Corki, one game of Azir, so he's got all the bases covered.
But if we think of Arya at its best, it's sort of things like, it's the LeBlanc, the Zoe, where he can
The Silas.
Yeah, where there's a little bit more agency and playmaking from earlier on sometimes. Not that something like Azir or Orianna can't do that, particularly within teamfight scenarios, but I don't think it's always necessarily what Ari would like from, say, 5th pick red side. Like, Orianna, 5th pick red side as a counter pick doesn't sound as exciting as, say, I don't know, pulling out something crazy like, I've picked Lucian into your cast and now I can destroy you, right? Not that they can't do that, but just global trends might concern me a little.
I don't disagree fully with either of what you've said. My only... I mean, my big caveat, actually, to what you've both said, and you both agreed with each other that CGA, red side, it's theirs. My big problem is when they lost 2 times mid-season, one of them, and then one of them was week 6. When they lost on red side, they lost to Burning Core and Axis, who didn't give a fuck what CGA did in either of those games, took it to them, and actually trounced them. Both times they got pretty well, actually, the Burning Core, they got trans. This Axis one was very bloody and gory in a lot of senses, and this was the spot, remember, when Aria went 5-0-4 on that Zoe and just couldn't carry because their comp just didn't line up together. Like, if these are like the mid to bottom teams, well, Axis isn't even made playoffs. Burning Core, depending on the day, can be the third best team in the region in my eyes, to also doing sixth. So, where does that put them?
No, there are also obviously caveats. This isn't as clean cut as they always win on red side, or they always lose on blue side. There's always some weird shit going on. I think that Axis are one of these rare teams in the LJL where they are not a top team, but have the macro knowledge and the team comp knowledge to pull out something a bit weird, like the Quinn TF Global comp they had. And that does play into CJ's weaknesses, where they do always want to have a fight, but you always split the map and you all have a numbers discrepancy when you play globals, and it might end up really screwing them.
And the Burning Core one was when Once just deleted the map in half.
Oh, I also think that was a really bad draft from Red 5. So they gave Red 5 counterpick to Aria, like they've done on Red side so many times, and they picked pretty much the worst pick they could have done in that position. They picked for the they picked an Aurelia into Galio, which is great in lane. Which is great in lane, and then in team fights he just taunts Aurelia, and Aurelia dies, and that's it. In fact, we saw that. Ages. I think it was like remember when like Immortals was super good and they played into TSM and like a couple of seasons ago, and I think this is a similar thing there when like the Aurelia came in and went to Galio and it's like, oh, really good in lane, and then as soon as team fights hits, and they lost their first game because of that, because they picked like an Aurelia into Galio. It's like, yeah, it's kind of awkward.
I'd agree.
I think it's great for him to have that champion in his champion pool, but you don't play into death ball like that.
And it's also like, this is the other thing, is like we don't want to reduce CGA down to
red side, blue side.
Like all they can do is fifth pick on red side, and that's the only way they lose. The other issue is that CGA look lost if they can't out team fight their opponents. Some of the other times when they have lost, probably most notably the last time they played DFM as well, or in the last week of play, week 7, they lost team fights. They were getting out team forward. And that was an Azir game into Heimerdinger, I remember, where Aria's Azir couldn't play Gango. They were starting fights when Gango wasn't around. And there is a world as well, like CGA are very good at team fighting, but if they find themselves in a game where, for whatever reason, they can't pick the fights they want to, or fights get started and then they can't team fight, they run out of options because they don't play the map as well necessarily as other teams.
So, to round up everything on our thoughts very briefly, we think CGA are topside favoured, mostly. We think
compared to Aramek, not for Aramek,
We think the Hawks are slightly favoured in the jungle.
Yeah, I think, I'd say that. Tussel's very good at controlling the map. Like, he's very good at, like, tracking the enemy jungle and all that other stuff,
We think mid's going to be the most exciting part to watch, but we also still lean Aria favoured.
Yeah.
And then bot lane is kind of a coin flip?
Yeah, kinda, but I think skill diff goes to CGA. I think that in terms of their awareness,
it goes to the Hawks.
So like, I favor CGA in the bot lane, but I will also say that CGA's bot lane are massively arrogant and are very punishable. So for as much as I favor them, like, that strength is very easy. It's quite easy to undercut that strength because they will play as if they're strong side. So like it's strength with the caveat that actually you can use this as a place to attack.
And that could definitely come back to haunt them, because it's like, well, what can you actually do? Like, what does that actually mean for the team fights? Especially if we've said that the jungle pressure is partly going to be in the Hawks' favor, right?
Well, I mean, this is something I wanted to touch on as well, because I know we've been focusing on CGA because we favor them, and it's also like they're one of those weird teams with like quite defined strengths, but also kind of oddly defined weaknesses too. I do want to touch on the Hawks a little bit, and where they have leveled up has been through like bringing up their floor. They aren't making as many bone dead mistakes in terms of being impatient, and that comes a lot from coaching staff. And I actually think that kind of thing can be pretty good versus a squad versus CGA. And this is where I think perhaps the Hawks have a way to get a win over CGA, or potentially take this series. And again, favor CGA. But like, there is a world where in that first 5 to 10 minutes, CGA have got themselves a good jungle plan, a good draft plans, and find way to pick apart, say, that bot lane that is, they forced to play on weak side and can't do it, and Tussle turns up with Dasher teleporting or whatever. Doing that with some good, solid prep work and draft planning could get the Hawks ahead, and I think that stability and raising of their skill floor with a certain amount of just good, solid game plan that they act on decisively could offer them something.
I think that there's always a chance that CJ come in with a horrible meta read and they draft horribly and whatever, right? I think that they maybe have the worst coaching staff in terms of what we've seen from them in draft and whatever, and their preparation of any of the top teams. Yeah. They have maybe the best player skill. I think if they were to get a huge meta read and everyone play on form, they're maybe the strongest LJL team, but how likely is that to happen?
We're contrasting
a lot of things have to go very well.
And we're contrasting like worst coaching staff with, yes, it's arrived late, but potentially the best. Like Sweet and Zandark are titans as far as coaching experience goes. Like,
and that's what we were poising coming into playoffs, and just for the Hawks in general, they could be the unknown team versus basically everyone who could just pull out really obscure drafts and random things that they've only practiced a few times in scrims. But if the coach are like, yeah, no, this should work, you should win this. There could be things that CGA just aren't ready for. We could be seeing things like we're like, ha, Sona, Lux, bot lane. But CGA could just be like, no, this is the time for it. And no, the Hawks could pull out and CGA just like, what the fuck do? We heard about this, but no one plays this shit, not even in solo queue. We could see this. We could see the Yone Yasuo bot. I mean, we're not going to because 10.16, but the Hawks could be a team that just go, yeah, we're doing it. And we just go, okay.
Well, that's why I thought that maybe the Hawks would be a very interesting matchup into DFM in the tiebreaker, because I thought they'd be a bit more of an unknown quantity. Of course, it didn't work out that way, and stuff like that. But yeah, that's always something which happens. I do think that, I mean, remember when V3 reverse swept CGA to get through to the round 3 match last spring and stuff? Like, remember CGA came out swinging in that series, though. They did their own little work there, and they so there's stuff to keep track of on both sides. At the end of the day, I think there are obviously ways that Hawks can play around stuff because they have some good players too. Like I said, they are very much like CJ in some of their own ways. I just don't think it's enough.
Sure.
I just don't think it's enough.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And there is a world where coach difference is the other.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, yeah. It is worth noting that they picked like 5th seed over 6th seed because Burning Core were like lower seed in the playoffs compared to the Hawks, right?
I mean,
that's something to it, but. Yeah, but I think they have a good matchup into the Hawks if you regard them as the same style, but CJ were better players.
Okay, we will give our full predictions on what we think once we've covered the Detonation FocusMe versus Burning Core game. So we can do our recaps, and then we're going to talk more holistically about how we think everything else will be going further. Team Detonation FocusMe facing off against Burning Core, gentlemen. This is teams that are 1-1. DFM got the first one, but then Burning Core fought back and got their second one. Where are we going with this one? Is this just a bloodbath? We didn't get the match that we all wanted. Detonation, CJ versus Burning Core.
Beautiful.
Partly for Initia1ise's vocal cords. I think we didn't get it, but where do we go with this, gentlemen?
Okay.
Oh, so hard to judge.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'll put this straight out. I favor DFM fairly heavily, but that's mainly because this is Yuhi and Yu-Gi-Oh coming into playoffs for their first time, and 2 rookies in playoffs versus the most experienced team in the LJL, and 2 rookies we haven't been all that hot on either. That's a recipe for disaster, like nearly guaranteed, like historically in League of Legends.
But
very few rookies have played that well in
But
playoffs.
to counter you, they're also facing off against Rayfarki and Once, who have arguably been maybe the best 2 players in their respective roles, facing off against an Ebby and Steel, who have looked horrendous until the very final game when they got their tiebreaker game. But even then, in my eyes, one game isn't enough for everything.
Yeah, this is why it's hard to judge, right? Because DFM have so many precedents set behind them, and this split has messed with so many of them. We are left with a little bit of like our internal compasses, like, where do we go with this? How long time scale are we judging things on? Is it going to be a DFM in playoff swarm? But then again, last spring they lost the best of 5 versus Sengoku, and then they had to come back to really revisit things. And then you kind of say, DFM, really good with preparation, but that didn't work in Super Week. What happens with that? DFM, Ebby's always been the best top laner. He's not been this split until, you know, he's had a lot of good games, don't get me wrong, lots of solo kills, but he has had some pretty bad ones too.
Bad games too.
So I'm looking...
Vladimir.
Yeah, his Vladimir
Vladimir
versus V3 in their second matchup. It's really hard to read DFM. I also favor them pretty heavily, don't get me wrong. I think that they looked much more together in their last week. I think they had some points where I was like, hey, this is looking a little bit more like traditional DFM, and that is scary coming into playoffs. They have all, and then again, you can just say, okay, a couple of weeks off, and then they also have that prep too. It's a new patch. They're normally pretty good with that. Caitlyn's coming into meta. That seems like a very DFM kind of pick.
Camille as well, and Ebby's.
And Camille Galio being such a big thing too. I do have some questions about them though. I think that Yuhi looked better. He's not been as tragic as he has been in previous weeks. He looked okay on the center and stuff like that, even in their loss. I think that the problem is the once looked very shaken in this last week. Is that going to be a continuing trend? Has he got anything more in the tank? Does he come back? Does this break actually allow him to come back stronger? Because actually, the first game they had versus DFM earlier in the split, once very nearly solo carried that himself. Once is really good, and he can potentially control the map himself.
Yeah, and like this is something as well. Like part of what I was excited about in Super Week was once pulled out the Kha'Zix, looked really strong on it. Then kind of teams worked out how they wanted to play against Kha'Zix, and we kind of saw that, yeah, Kha'Zix is strong, but put the caveat in that
he's not blind pick uncounterable.
He's not blind pick uncounterable, exactly. And Burning Core kind of rely on once being able to get a jungler in the first round, just so he doesn't get banned out of carry junglers.
Sure.
And that's still an issue. Yeah, not that Burning Core don't have worlds where they can absolutely outplay, but we've always said they've got their win conditions are strong, but they're quite narrow to draft towards, and it's namely getting something that once and Rayfarki can carry through at once, and getting Yuhi on something he feels comfortable on. That, assuming the opposing team is good at drafting, can sometimes be a bit of a challenge.
Oh yeah, remember that Aphelios has been really heavily nerfed on patch 10.15.
So we've got Ashe and Sword of Senna for Yuhi right now.
That means that Aphelios isn't going to be banned.
Yeah,
probably.
That's true. That's true.
And just because Aphelios or a champion and necessarily starts lowering in play rate and ability doesn't mean that they shouldn't still be played. Aphelios is still a champion that should still be played. People have been saying for months now that Jinx is very viable at the moment. Just the competitive pulse for pros just isn't there. And that's a big thing that I think gets overlooked. Pros just go, these are the champions we want to play. That doesn't necessarily mean they are the best. It just means that's where they're indexing, and that's where a lot of people... And
it allows your whole team to practice around them and be practiced with them. That's actually more valuable sometimes than it being the efficient pick, actually. Yeah. It's like, say I play... I mean, I'm using my own example, right? I'm an Ari one-trick. If I play in a team...
No, you're an Ari one-trick? No, we never would have guessed.
If I keep playing Ari, and even though there are champions which are better in class, if my team are better prepared to play with a champion which is a one-trick or something which is more practiced with, it's going to be higher value for your team than something which is maybe a better pick, right? Say LeBlanc, Gecko, Ari, or whatever. And you can say the same about the Caitlyn, the Aphelios, or whatever. If you're more practiced with the Aphelios on Burning Core compared to something like the Jinx, the Caitlyn, whatever, it's more valuable to them either way.
So, sorry, go for it.
Just something else, before we kind of move on for the AD carry thing as well, is that there's also something to be said for Caitlyn aside, who is very much all about lane pressure, early play to destroy things early. Things like Ashe and Jhin are kind of the meta picks right now, with Caitlyn being, as I said, that aside. And they tend to be a little bit more on the utility end. And actually, as long as that Ashe is landing the right arrows or Jin's landing the right deadly flourishes and opening up with Curtain Call at the right time, you don't have to be the hard carry on that champion. You can just be a role player. And that could be something that Burning Call could kind of crutch on a little bit too. Maybe.
I remember they play Senna too, and Senna's good. Senna's good.
Senna's not bad right now. I agree.
I think that the one thing is that Yuhi is not good at Ezreal, and Utapon is a very good Ezreal.
But, that brings up a point that I actually wanted to go for with the Ezreal. So, perfect. Thank you, Nymaera. Thank you. Can DFM draft more than a 1 point of pressure comp? We saw it in the tiebreaker match, and I was flaming DFM for it, because it was either it was all Utapon or bust. They have continuously done this. When they lost to Burning Core, they drafted a 1 pressure comp. They got stopped. They got denied that, and Burning Core takes the win. they need to start doing that, because I think
Yeah.
if Burning Core index on that, they could just ban Utapon out and maybe win through that.
So I know Nymaera had a look at that game afterwards and actually kind of disagreed with what we said about it being just the one threat, just because of how squishy Hawks were.
So yeah, the caveat is DFM had a very low damage comp in comparison to League of Legends, not in comparison to the game. Because it's like, if you traded the Kennen and the Volibear or whatever, right? Or like you had another tank and the enemy team had a tank top lane, like had a Maokai, Ezreal eventually becomes very neutered. Whereas in this game, where you're playing as an Ezreal versus a Kennen, not tanky, doesn't ever tank Ezreal's damage. Lee Sin, same. Orianna, same. Aphelios, Thresh. Ezreal is in a position where if he can keep free hitting, he can carry the fight solo. In this comp alone, I don't mind it.
Yes,
and that's also, like, kind of it.
And then Volibear and Karma come in as like, at that point, their damage is enough to blow people up. So like, you have agree with you, Lexi, but that game.
No, but that's the point doesn't change, and you both agree with me.
If they did this in a different draft.
Yeah. And if the Hawks just draft a tank, like an actual tank, DFM just lose probably. That is worryingly, that is like such a huge problem, and they're against the Hawks who up and down. I don't know if against Burning Core they'll get that same kind of reprieve, because Yu-Gi-Oh's probably going to play a utility mid laner, and then they're going to be like, okay, DFM have struggled against utility mid laners, so it's like, okay, where do we go from there? Okay, well, we'll try and do it down bot lane. Well, if they just put Yuki on a champion like Aphelios and say, don't die, dickhead, They surely just win the game now, because they just go, they neuter Utapon, they just ban his Ezreal and a bunch of other shit, and just go, fuck it, figure it out, guys, we should win this one now.
I am worried for DF, so I think that, so I've had the,
I'm also partly just going against DFM, just to kind of throw some interesting conversation here.
I think that particularly in regards to like the DFM and this draft in particular, the one in the tiebreaker match with the Hawks. So I was talking with a couple of the guys that played in the UEM guys, so university level, but towards the upper end of that.
It's amateur.
But you know, you've got grandmaster players, so they have and they've been playing in pseudo competitive and have been playing in ER. Some of them play in ERL, so you've got that kind of upper end. So I was talking to the support of the winning team, and they said, look, pro teams across the world, the worst thing they do in general is bans 4 and 5. Bans 4 and 5 people just completely entered away. And there are a lot of reasons for that. I think that a lot of people don't realize what the enemy comp does from the first 3 picks.
Which is stupid. Which is so stupid.
You can pivot, but it's like, if you pick Galio, you know what that team is doing. Same with like Kai'Sa or stuff like that. There are some picks you just like... It's like, so like when DFM picked like Ezreal Karma and the Volibear, you know that they're not going to have the highest damage ever.
No, unless they pick like a Kindred or something into the jungle.
You can flex the Karma down to support. You can flex the Karma down to support and pick something, right? But like you know how they can do certain things, right? But DFM, in fairness, they actually did have some flex kind of picks to get the Volibear in there, but like they chose to use their second.
They played it face up.
They tried to.
They didn't have to. Though,
so they banned away. They banned away Galio and Zoe in their second round, where I'm like, honestly, you need to ban away Ornn. If you ban away, if the Hawks don't pick Kennen on pick 4 and they go for Ornn instead,
has Aramik played Ornn?
That's a very good question, but
I want to say no.
Let me have a look.
Off the top of my head,
he's played it 2 times, won once, lost once.
Okay.
So his Kennen he's played 4 times. Wukong he's played 5 times. He's only played it twice and valued some stuff over it, but.
Interested to see what that wins again. I feel like it's a Rascal Jester win, which I'm not sure if it counts.
I can have a look actually.
Because they get like it could be one of those caveats.
Axes.
Oh, well, it was early access.
So there is a caveat where we say it might just be that there is scrim results coming.
Sure, but like you could pick something like Maokai instead, or something which is just somewhat tanky in the top side, and then suddenly DFM need to draft very tanky, and they have a stationary Karma that can get picked off, and it's kind of awkward, right? I am still worried for DFM in the draft. I think that they're not... I think their CGA draft was good. I think they found out what they could do with it, but CGA are not the best drafters themselves.
No, it's they're a team that I'm horrendously critical of their drafts.
Yeah, but then the thing for me is that, like, the question is, like, can they... The thing is that in pick Red 5, you can pivot your comp in so many different ways if you leave certain stuff open, and CGA are really good at that. But they have to get to a point where that pivot is actually important. They have
That's the one thing they can pivot at. They can't pivot anywhere else.
Yeah, they don't pivot anywhere else, Whereas, like, in this draft for DFM, they do pivot pretty well on picks 4 and 5, but they could have been in such a bad position. Such a bad position if they don't crutch onto Aramik continually playing Kennen.
And again, that might have been a read from scrims. There is definitely a world where they say Aramik's not playing anything else but carries right now.
Yeah, so I think the Hawks pick 4 and 5 are kind of awkward, and DFM's bans 4 and 5 kind of awkward. And then I'm like, so yeah, like I said, there's kind of a growing sentiment that people's bans 4 and 5 are not great across the world. I would agree.
Yeah,
I think that some teams are better at that. I think that, so when I was watching like I think it might have been V3 Sengoku, there were a couple of bans there I was like, hey, that's a really good Ornn ban again. Like, there are some picks where you're just like, look, you're drafting so much engage, you need to ban disengage. Oh, what was that? There was one game where I talked about that. It was something like V3, it was someone locking in like, I think it might have been V3 DFM. And like they had to draft disengage and they just didn't draft disengage.
Yeah.
And they lost the game because of that. So I mean, I know we've tunneled really far on this point, but I think it is worth giving this as context of we still have so many questions about some of these teams and whether this is like a habit they fall into, even with the coaching staff they have.
Yeah, and we'll go for it.
No, you finish this one up. I want to go somewhere different, so you take this one and finish it.
Oh, I was going to just round it up, so go for it.
Yeah. Okay, so the other thing I want to say is specifically with the way both of these teams have been team fighting is that we had so many questions about what the hell was DFM doing in team fights, where they were losing team fight situations where they were slightly desynced. The last week, they looked a lot better around their objective team fights.
Wait, last week? Seriously? You think they looked better?
Week 7 team fights? Yeah, absolutely.
Not the tiebreaker. Not the tiebreaker.
No, because there was sort of things like there was the one dragon fight where Udapom was flashing out of solar flares, as was Gang, and then they're turning it around in 3v5s and all that kind of thing.
I also don't think you can put a Rascal Jester game there as accounting for them improving. I don't think that's fair.
This was the Hawks game.
No, you're talking about DFM, Rascal. Week 7, they played against Rascal Jester CGA, and yeah, they played good against CGA, but they also played Rascal Jester, and I don't think you can add that as a whole week. Personally, I'm nitpicking you here. I'm just being a nitpick.
I'm saying Jesters, CGA, and Hawks, where I actually think the objective team fights were better than we've seen in a while, so that's good news.
They had to improve quite a lot. That's the caveat there, that they did look pretty bad, and we had to judge them by that. So
yeah, but exactly. So like that's good news. That said, I think CGA had a bit of an off week, and I also think that there is a world where while Burning Core did as well, there have been worlds where particularly Rayfarki and Rayfarki, Proud, and Once have found ways to catch DFM off guard or catch teams off guard in general. I'm looking back to the Alistair game, particularly for Proud, where DFM are great when they can kind of read what an enemy team is doing, and like say Utapon gets to just read what's happening, flash away, be safe. He's pretty
DFM are very good when they realize what the enemy team comp can do and draft a way to just like neutralize their tools rather than... I am afraid for DFM because they draft a lot of stationary picks in mid lane.
They can do.
And if you do leave open good engage options, they can overcommit. They can. We've seen them continually fight with like Ezreal with Tyr at dragon fights when they think that they can get away with it. They don't. Same with Herald, and like Ash arrows come in when they just haven't planned for that, and they just lose the fights.
So again, they got a lot better at that in the last week. It's 1 week sample size, and it's 3 games, and those 3 games look better around those objective fights and Herald fights in particular. Having said that, for all that DFM have improved there is, it's also been a strength of Burning Core that they have been pretty good in their skirmishes, and they've got players who could catch DFM off guard. So I'm favouring DFM. I'm also aware that maybe that's a world where Burning Core
I will also say that Gang looked very good in this last week. That's one thing which I think is a big up for DFM, because Gang was the best support in Spring, we agreed.
So good.
His Leona and his Bard, very different champions, but still have a lot of engage opportunities. He had a good week. Yeah, I think it was my support of the week, actually, thinking about the last episode. And that's something which we haven't seen from this team for a while. So if he's stepping up, it's a good thing for them.
A big problem for me still for also DFM is they went on a 5-loss streak, and that is just hugely worrying for me when I look for DFM in the future.
Consistency matters.
Yeah, and that's like a huge thing, because that 5-loss streak basically destroyed the Dynasty's record of how they always do things. They beat Burning Core and then promptly lost until after Burning Core had beaten them. Like, that's how long they lost for, but they beat Burning Core. That was the last time they got a win till Burning Core beat them, and then they beat Axis in week 6. It is kind of crazy that it took them 3 weeks to eventually get back a win after beating Burning Core.
And that's what's worrying me in terms of if they get the wrong read coming into tomorrow, do I think they can adapt mid-series because they didn't do it over a 5-game loss streak? It's a question.
And also, it was during Super Week and 2 different patches, which normally favors DFM as well. Moving in patches.
That's why we're saying, like, I was talking about CJ in terms of, what's going to happen in round 2 if they face DFM? Are DFM a top team that can outdraft them on blue side and force them to do weird stuff? I am not confident in DFM. I think the route is there if they were to make a full recovery. I don't think it's going to be that easy.
I think the question is, gentlemen, when we come to do it, we will go first back to the Hawks and CGA predictions and why we're saying our scores and everything, because we've already hinted towards CGA Hawks pretty heavily. Are we going to be seeing playoffs DFM, or are they not? Or is that gone? Is the magic done? Is the dynasty over? All good things must come to an end. Even the T1 era had to come to an end. The TSM CLG era had to come to an end when Cloud9 came up. But is this the end of the DFM era? And we'll leave that full question there. I just want to kind of get people's lips a little bit tasting. I want to get them parched.
DFM era makes it... The way it sounds like that is that it's all DFM. And in fairness, LJL's kind of all been DFM for a while now.
There's been few contenders.
At the very best, this is a mixed era now. This is one which is shared by a great many teams. I don't think I can call it a DFM era because this... I don't... If they make it through the finals, it's going to be bloody hard fought. It's going to be ridiculously hard for them to get to finals and win. They have to play against Burning Corp, a team which has taken a game off them, and have ways to beat them. I don't think this will... There's a way where this series is really not easy for them. We'll get into whether I think that'll be the case when we get to predictions and stuff. Then they have to play maybe CGA. Ridiculously good team this split. If they come on form, that's going to be very hard. And then they have to face V3 and Sengoku in either order in a row. Like, come on, that's ridiculous. It's four best of fives back-to-back versus some of the best teams in the league.
But whoever can do it, if anybody does do it, what a story you get to say by coming all that way. Gentlemen, it's about time that we start to give our predictions. Now, we are going to be giving out predictions for potentially the whole bracket. Joshi actually did this over on his Twitter. I saw this and I thought this was actually a really cool thing to do. So we are going to be running through a full bracket of our own wildest predictions. But to also keep it with the podcast, we're going to be giving kind of almost 2 predictions. We're going to be going through the whole bracket that we assume, but that will come second. What we're going to be doing now is our actual opinions on who we believe is going to win. Now, we talked about this before we came on. This is the one that counts for the Discord and everything. This is where we get to be the most honorable analyst of all time, and everybody else can suck it as part of Degeneration X, if anyone wants to get that reference. No? All right, I'll be on my own here.
I'm leaving you there. I'm leaving that one hanging.
All right, fine. I said suck it, and I looked over at you both, and you're like, what the fuck's he talking about? I'm like, oh yeah, I'm the...
wow, this guy's aggro today.
I'm like, oh yeah, I forget I'm the wrestling nerd of the podcast, and I'm not even really that much of a wrestling nerd. Gentlemen, 1 point for the prediction, and if you get it correct, and an extra point if you count the actual the record perfectly. Now, you get nothing if you get it wrong. You get nothing! So 2 points up for grabs, 1 for the correct winner, 1 for the correct prediction of scoring. Nymaera, our color caster, who's already kind of hinted towards your predictions for Crest Gaming out versus the Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks Gaming. Who's winning the match? Why are they winning the match? And then your predictions. I'll then come to you, Initialize, and then we'll round out to myself. We'll then come to you, Initialize, for the DFM ones. I'll keep it spicy.
For match 1 of round 1, CGA versus Hawks, Crest Gaming Act are going to win. They are going to win 3-1 because they have better individual players, and I don't think the Hawks have the same ability as some other teams to set up the map to the disadvantage of Crest Gaming Act.
Okay, so 3-1, Nymaera in favor of CGA.
They'll get lucky one game. Variance.
The Hawks will get lucky. They'll coin flip against the CGA and they'll get it. Even though with the coin, in Nymaera's opinion, being slightly weighed in CGA's favor. Initialize, same question. Who's winning? Why are they winning? And your prediction.
I concur with Nymaera. I think it will be CGA
Solidarity!
winning 3-1. I think there is going to be one game where CGA int the draft or into the bot lane, and they will lose it there. Otherwise, I expect them to win fairly well.
Initialize doubling down. Get that double down KFC sponsorship. We over here on the LJL Officially Unofficial. CGA versus the Hawks 3-1. Two of us, and pick or ban phase or bot lane int for CGA. That's why the Hawks will get one of those wins. To myself,
Yeah, I was about to say.
I actually have to agree. Written down here, you can see 3-1 CGA, even though it was flipped there, so you don't actually get to see it. CGA versus the Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks Gaming. I'm going also 3-1 in favor of CGA. I'm of the opinion that actually the Hawks will just kind of have a really solid game. I don't think this will be a CGA int. I actually think
That's
it
fair.
will actually be
fair.
Hawks will actually play a game similar to how Axis and Burning Core beat the Hawks on red side. I actually think it's going to be a red side win for the Hawk. CGA on red side, blue side Hawks.
Oh, okay. So they pick a power pick and they win with it.
Yeah, and they just counter pick. They like CGA get to do whatever they want, and I actually think it's going to be the reverse way around. I think CGA will win one side on blue side, versus the Hawks,
Okay.
for it to be the 3-1. Little bit different, partly because also got to kind of can't completely join you guys, but also I think I'm a little bit more optimistic on the Hawks. Part of that is also from when we did Super Week and Counterfeit was with me.
Yeah.
He kind of reignited. Yeah, exactly, and he also reignited my hope for the Hawks. So
Yeah.
3-1 still though. I'm not I'm not giving them 2 wins. That's just a bit too
Not going
optimistic.
too big for your breakthrough. Yeah.
That's fair.
I'll need to ask Counterfeit because he'll be like 3-0 Hawks. I'll be like, ugh. Oh.
He's taken on your Hawks energy from spring.
Yeah, but he also didn't experience Spring Hawks, so...
Oh, they were bad, man.
Wasn't so much Hawks as
Ramine.
pigeons.
yeah, ooh. Fair. I like
bog.
that. And now, gentlemen, we haven't by anywhere near hinted, previewed, spoiled our predictions for Detonation FocusMe facing off against Burning Core. We're going to go to our resident Detonation FocusMe man himself.
You know.
Initialize. Sir, what's your prediction for this? Why? Oh no, who's winning? Why are they winning? And your prediction, sorry.
Slightly spelled that. DFM,
Yeah.
indeed, will be winning 3-1 over Burning Core. I think that Burning Core have 2 rookies coming into playoffs for the first time. That very rarely goes well, even if those rookies look great in the regular split. These ones largely haven't. I also think that DFM have been looking stronger in areas we've been criticizing them for, and I expect that trend to be continuing upwards through playoff.
Okay. Nymaera, if you would like to give your prediction of who's winning, why are they winning, and your final score for the game.
DFM are going to win. Why are they going to win? I think that they can play through much further. I think they have more players they can play through in every lane, as opposed to Burning Core having some deficits in both mid and bot lane. I think that even the strength of Burning Core can be met by Ebby and Steel on form. I think that this will help the draft a lot. I also think that the patch will come in very big for DFM, with the likes of Caitlyn being very, very powerful and the likes of the fellas not being very powerful.
That's true.
And because of that, I think they're going to win 3-0.
Okay, and now for me to come in with the controversial pick and prediction why. I predict Burning Core to win.
Fair.
My reason for Burning Core winning is due to very small game sample size. Detonation FocusMe are actually not going to be coming in as playoff DFM. I am predicting a continuation from Super Week DFM, where Burning Core looked incredibly strong during Super Week, as opposed to Detonation FocusMe, who could only get a win versus a team that were basically regaining any form of confidence on a brand new patch with a brand new team, and they still looked half decent. I am extremely worried for Destination FocusMe coming into this match and playoffs in general. This is the shakiest they've ever looked. They are against also maybe some of the best players in their respective roles. Proud has been maybe the best support in a lot of spots. His Alistair game also against DFM basically destroyed them face up. We also have got Rayfarky and Want, who have been having phenomenal games, and I believe they'll be able to carry it. Proud has been making up for a lot of Yuki's problems and shortcomings in my eyes. And Yu-Gi-Oh! Actually, you could almost see him as an ace who the team don't have to worry about. Play utility, mid laners, everybody else can do it for them. I think Burning Core are going to beat DFM 3-2.
Okay. I think if there's a world where Burning Core do win, that's how they do it. I'm with you.
Yeah, no.
And I'd be super excited to see that. I'm a massive Once fan, so I'd love to see it.
This is why as soon as we opened up the topic of DFM Burning Core, it's like, hey guys, this is really hard to predict. It's like there's way too many moving variables.
I also want to destroy Initia1ise's voice for for a round 2. CJ Burning Core. I'm like, that's not going away. Lads, we're getting it, and it's just going to be even more hype because of the teams and who they've beaten already. I want the narratives. I want CJ to be like, we clawed through fucking everybody, and then they just got slapped by Sengoku. It's like, that's V3. That's awkward, lads. So, gentlemen, we have given our predictions. We agreed almost unanimously. Yeah. Actually, no, it was unanimously for the Crest Gaming Act versus Sengoku game. The Hawks game. Hawks. God, I see the SG and
SHG.
So that was unanimous. Our prediction and points. So if we all get 2 points for that, we already know. Now, you both picked Destination FocusMe, but your predictions for the scores were different. Initia1ise believes that Burning Core will pick up 1, whereas Nymaera believes it's all DFM all day till Sunday.
I hope.
And I've gone the opposite way, and I actually think Destination FocusMe are looking a little bit shaky. But we will find out in playoffs what will actually be going on, and it's going to be this week. So if you're not sure when, go over and check on our Discord, our podcast, our Twitter and everything else, but we'll be covering the games over on the 15th. So keep your eyes peeled on our social media. Now, gentlemen, I hinted towards something earlier that we haven't gone actually fully through. Now, this we don't have to get super right. It's something that I saw Joshi doing over on his Twitter. And this was his overview of how playoffs will actually go. Now, we don't have to get this explicitly right. Obviously, we can bring our previous predictions into this. But this is our pick'ems for who do we believe is going to win. If you're interested, anybody, you can also find in our show notes a nice little picture that we will make up for each of our little predictions. And we will also be sharing this on our social media, just so we have a little bit of something to share out there. These are going to be our pick'ems. Thank you, Nymaera, for actually figuring out the correct terminology for that. I appreciate that hugely. So we've already given our round 1. Who we think's going to win that? So we don't have to go super in-depth into who we think's going to win versus the V3 Sengoku match. We're going to talk about hugely. You can just give your numbers, and we can change it, because once we start seeing the patch we're playing on and everything else, we can change that.
Yeah.
What's your score's going to be for V3 Sengoku quickly?
I'm actually saying Sengoku 3-1.
Okay.
I know that might be controversial. I think a lot of it comes from the fact that Ace looked a bit meh on stuff like LeBlanc, which is something which he's crutched on quite a bit, so which makes me think that he kind of has to go back to the more utility mids, and that makes V3's draft a bit more predictable. I also think that they're kind of V3 are drafting a little bit weirdly. They're drafting themselves into holes a bit. But in their loss to Sengoku, we saw how the Kazakhs could just do absolutely nothing that game. In their loss to CJ in Super Week, they, in fairness, played really, really well. I do think they were the better team on the day, but they just drafted themselves like a 0-win condition comp, where and they made it interesting. Don't get me wrong. And I think that Sengoku are a team which is probably the most balanced across the map in the LJL in terms of like top, mid, jungle, everything. Like they've got the most even balance of power between their players across the map, which means that they can pivot and draft a bit better, and like punish V3 and draft a bit more. I don't know what would happen in a rematch in the finals. But I think that first match, and also because Caitlyn and Jhin are very, very powerful right now, I think that favors bot lane for Sengoku over V3. Although that could be completely wrong, because Archer could be a god at Caitlyn or Jhin or all the other stuff. But yeah, that's my first thoughts.
Okay, Initia1ise, your thoughts?
I'm giving it to V3 3-1.
Okay.
But I very much agree with what Nymaera is saying there. There is a world where Sengoku come into this, and the things like Oriana and Azir being incredibly high priority across the world right now is paradise for Pyrian. And also that things like Kalista have fallen down in priority for people like Archer is a bit problematic for V3. I still favor V3 because I think the way they have been playing still works, and I think Sengoku Gaming are very reliant on basically just winning, like fundamentally early on, and they look significantly less good if that doesn't happen. And I think V3 are really good at upping the tempo and making sure that things aren't stable to the point where Sengoku are happy about.
I agree with you. I think it's going to be a little bit closer though. Initia1ise, and I'm going 3-2 V3. I still think they're just by far the best team, and having one or two hiccups is not enough. It's the same reason why I can't give it to DFM.
Oh, this is why I'm doing it now.
Oh yeah, it's the same reason why I can't give it to DFM at the moment, because I just think Burning Core are a more consistent team at the moment, and V3 have just been the most, just so good, so often. We almost can't stop singing their praises. And then they have a hiccup, and I'm like, well, that's not enough for me to completely stop caring. If it was a split difference, different story. But yeah, so I'm going 3-2 Sengoku. Now, gentlemen, this is where we're all going to start divulging a little bit, because match 2 is different. Now, you guys both have CGA versus DFM.
Yeah.
Who's winning that?
For me, it's CGA, and they're going to do it 3-2. I think it's going to be really, really close.
Okay.
Yeah, I do think that DFM will have some stuff cooked up, and I think that Initia1ise has been playing really, really well, and with AD carries being, well, with stuff like Caitlyn being very meta, and Ezreal being another counter pick, another pick which he plays very well on, I think that Initia1ise will be enough for DFM to team fight their way through some craziness. Okay. I don't think CGA will be as easy to take apart as they were in the one match versus DFM where they lost. I actually think that CGA were just a little bit disconnected in a way which wasn't so usual for them, and if they were playing on the same page, it would have been a much easier game, and Arya would have just got to do Azir things. So I think that this series is probably going to be the closest one in the entire playoffs.
Okay. Initia1ise?
I agree, but I'm going to edge it over to DFM.
That's fair. So, same reasons, I guess.
Yeah, same basic reasons. I also think that DFM are the potential for them to set up vertical jungling and really put CGA's bot lane behind could really screw them over too. So I give it that.
So I have Burning Core versus CGA.
You do? That's going to be beautiful. I really hope for that. That would be the best.
I like how you're like, my favorite team gets knocked out, and I'm happy about this because of the match I get given.
So good.
I also do give this to CGA though. So I actually side with Nymaera, but we get to the same round. No, we actually get to different round 3s because you predicted V3 winning.
Yeah.
V3 losing. So no, we're not actually all the same. But I also predict CGA to win against Burning Core. Let's be real. I don't think there's a world where Burning Core get to round 2 and then somehow beat CGA, unless CGA int it, because they definitely could against them. I'm hopeful though that we're going to get CGA always coming up heads every single time. They're going to run like heads all so far, honestly speaking.
Yeah. In fairness, like if you look at the rest of the split, I mean, they were poised to finish second. They're not just a coin flip team. They're very good. They're individually, they're very, very good. We talk about them being high variance because they go for high risk plays, but they are good enough to make them work. So don't sleep on them. CGA are very good. Put it this way, CGA, you can put them anywhere in this bracket, round 1, 2, 3, 4, and it would have a reason to it why they ended up there.
Okay, so I went last this time, so we'll go me, then we'll go Initia1ise, and we'll go Nymaera.
Sure.
So I have got Sengoku facing off against CGA. Now, just when I was quickly doing...
Semis, isn't it?
This is my round 3, yeah. I have predicted CGA are going to coin flip their way to beat Sengoku.
You're kidding me.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I love it. God, that's great.
So the reason for this is CGA can just beat anybody and they can lose to anybody. I'm actually predicting CGA to 3-1 Sengoku.
I love it. You're a madman and I love it.
So the reason I'm predicting this is part of it's going to be what happened against Axis versus Sengoku those weeks ago during Super Week, where Sengoku didn't respect their jungler, and then Hoglet said, "What the fuck are you doing to me?" and slapped around Pyrian and Blank 3 ways till Sunday. It's going to be Unica's game 2 of these games, and the man's going to go from he's kind of whatever to actually, oh my god, he's ancient, and that's where I think it's going to go. Now, Initialize, you have a very different round 3. You have Destination FocusMe facing off against Sengoku.
I do. And this is the point where I go big or go home, and I say DFM 3-2.
Oh! We're getting the gauntlet. We're going all the way up.
If I want to win this prediction game, I've got to pull a bit of spice.
Wait, are we doing prediction game off of this one or?
No. Prediction game's off of the actual. This is for funsies where we
because you can't predict the actual matchup.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Gotcha. Okay, so it's actually pre-game.
But if anyone gets it, I don't care what the Discord server thing is. You just win it through this if you somehow predict the whole pick'ems.
I think DFM win 3-2. I actually think Sengoku faltered a little bit since Super Week generally.
Interesting. But they got up to second place.
They did, and they had a great. Well, they had a really weird Super Week. Then they had a great Week 7.
That's true.
And
it was a really good Week 7, actually.
Yeah, it was a really good week. And I expect it to be really, really close. I'm gonna call it as DFM edging it out, basically because they will punish Yutori in the bot lane a little bit as well, who's been a little uncontested as of.
Okay, so we've got CGA going to the finals, Detonation FocusMe going to the finals, both two teams from round 1. Nymaera, if I'm correct, you've got CGA facing off against V3 in round 3? Now, run us through that one.
Can I hear the church bells ringing?
So,
I think is that here?
So, okay, hear me out here, guys. You know I said that CJ needs side choice for a lot of things.
Yeah.
I think it potentially could have hamstrung them if they were second or first, because they would have to face, if they were to get back to the finals, face the same team twice. I think that means that gives too much information to the other team. I think in a single best of 5, they're actually really, really good. I'm going to say they're going to win 3-1 against V3.
Wow.
Beautiful.
I'm chilling out for them so hard.
It's beautiful. This is why we're doing this. This is why we're doing this. The spice.
Yeah, I think that.
Right.
Okay, so going into a little bit deeper, I think Paz has not impressed me all too much the last couple of weeks, and I think that Nap coming into team fights in a strong state and also being in playoffs form if he gets to it, really, really good news for them. Also, stuff like Shen will be back in a large way, I think, and Nap is a good Shen player. Potentially, the assuaging kind of some of CJ's global problems. Stuff like TF being worse, Karma being less. Actually, was that 10-15? No,
Yes.
Karma wasn't affected on that. No, it was 10-16.
Was Karma enough? Or was that 10-16?
But
okay.
Yeah, but stuff like.
I mean,
CGA
is the kind of team that will 100% pick up Shen Yumi and just hyper carry through Aria or some bullshit like that.
Just give him like Lucian, who's
Yeah,
Lucian
or even just put him on his Silas and just be like, he don't die, he steal everything you Stop it!
So I think that, CGA, again, really, really coin flip team. I haven't been too impressed by Ace. I think that when he hopped onto the Jace versus CJ and their loss, I was like, that's maybe his best lane. Okay, I get his shit out of lane with the Jace because his team don't know how to do anything with it. Because teams like Garm and VCS, again, we were on their desk on the weekend, so we saw them a bit. Like, DetonatioN, really, really good with that pick. Shows you how it works. Outside of lane, and he's really good in lane. Ace uses Jace as a crutch lane, and he did okay versus DO1, but he didn't really do anything outside of it. I'm worried that he either gets really crushed in lane, or he has a pick which can't do anything outside of lane, because, so I think that's going to be a continual issue, and, this is a complete Hail Mary, but 3-1 CGA. Look, I can't reason with it too much. Sometimes you just got to trust in blind faith.
Okay,
This is it.
so, we will now go to Initialize first. Actually, no, we'll go to Initialize last, actually. We'll go to Initialize last. Yep. I'll go... Oh, no. Nymaera, you first, sir.
Okay.
You get to keep going. So this is going to be CGA versus Sengoku, and I've already predicted this one, so I'm interested in your predictions for this one.
CGA 3-1.
Yeah!
CGA 3-1.
Funny, that!
CGA are your summer 2020 champions, ladies and gentlemen.
He's doubling down from 2 podcasts ago, Initialize.
I am so hard. I'm simping so hard. Sam, no. What are you doing?
He's going to come in and slap you. I don't mind it. He's like blasphemy. He's going to throw the holy water on you, mate.
Ow. Ow. Ow.
He needs more holy water and a cross. He needs to be like, the power of Christ compels you.
Yeah. I do think that Afferman has been playing really, really well, and if Afferman's on
for such silliness.
So I think that if Afferman is on form, things are not easy this playoffs. I think that I think a lot of why Sengoku might beat V3 as well is because Afman's been playing quite well. It might get to the point where you have to ban his Mordekaiser.
Okay.
Might get to that kind of point. I don't trust Sengoku to out-team fight CJ over the course of the best of 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, for Nymaera, they come through from from round 1. They run all the way up through the finals team, from our gauntlet match teams and everywhere else to win and be your LJL Summer Split Champions and representing the LJL at Worlds. I have Crest Gaming Act facing off against V3 Sports in the finals. CGA have been running it up, and then they get 3-1'd. And it's just sad. And Arya never gets to do anything in mid lane. He tries his best. He goes 3-0-4 and doesn't get a single important kill in a team fight. He just looks neutered. And that's how V3 have figured it out. They're just like, we just don't play around that. We don't team fight them when they want. We objective control. And this game's real easy when we don't face Arya when he wants to face us. 3-1 V3. It's a little anticlimactic as V3 just win their 2 games in their round 2 and the finals, and they do it pretty well. They had more of a harder match versus Sengoku, as I think that's the more interesting matchup. Yep. Controversial, but that's where I'm going with it. That's where I'm going with it. V3 will be your LJL 2020 Summer Split Champions and representing the LJL at Worlds. But Detonation FocusMe are still in the running, aren't they, Initia1ise? They're in the finals, and they're against V3, aren't they, sir?
I was about to say V3-3-1, and then you took that from me, so I can't do that anymore. And that means that now I'm going to flip it. And it's going to be DFM. We can't have a draw.
You're such a villain. You're such a villain.
Oh, you can't double down with me. You can't back me up.
So I can't do it. So it's going to have to be 3D DFM.
By the way,
and I'll tell you how it's going to happen.
By the way, before we started talking about this, I did actually have CGA losing in the semis, but...
Exactly.
Oh my god!
Okay.
I'm the only one that kept to what they wrote down!
Yeah. Look, there it is. There it is written down. You can't see it. There it is. I can't have that, so it's going to get scrubbed out. I'm going to have 3-2 to DFM. No, actually, no. Screw that. 3-1 to DFM. And it's going to happen because Camilla's a thing, and Paz is going to be able to deal with it because Ebby will be on that. And then Arch will try and play Callista and realize that Leona is a thing, spend his entire time getting slowed and dying in the bot lane. Yeah. And because V3's bot lane collapses and can't play for tower plates, and Ebby is
Archer and Rhino are gonna collapse. Yeah.
And then Ace can't, and then Ace doesn't get to punish Seros, and Seros plays.
No, of course, because Ace is the point of contention.
Of course, and Seros picks it away from Ace, so you end up with Galio Camille and a bot lane that V3 can't play through, and then Boogie's left with 3 losing lanes and 2 side lanes that lose. So that's gonna happen 3-1 to DFM. And I had that written down since the beginning of this podcast, and I haven't changed. And
DFM continue to represent the LJL, exactly. And to the outer world, there has never been any change in form of. DFM won spring, and they would have gone to MSI if it happened, and they're going to Worlds. It's just.
They pulled a G2. Oh, they just did this to give other people hope. That's the only way that they've done this.
Wow. I'm looking forward for you two to both fucking post your shit, because I look like the only sane analyst, even though I somehow picked CGA beating Sengoku in round 3.
Oh god, no, this is gonna be so bad. I'm gonna have acclaimed and Joshi flaming me so much.
Yeah, and I'm gonna look like... And what? And Initia1ise, you think you're getting through safe and sound?
I believe in my quality analysis here.
Look, I'm gonna throw it out.
At least you've got a brand going on.
I am gonna throw this out there. The tiebreaker match was low quality. It was pretty dire. I watched it back. I did the VOD and was like, oh sweet Jesus, why is this game still going? DFM can't close a game.
They nearly lost it. All the objectives was fine, and then couldn't claim it closing the base.
Nymaera, did you not VOD review mine and Initia1ise casting? Because we stopped talking about the game halfway through, and we start talking about other things. Because we're like,
I heard bits and pieces of it.
Yeah, very good, very good. Very good. We had some fun conversations there.
Well, we see the same because I think it was Everyday popped in halfway through and was like, and then we just started about talking about his chickens, his pet chickens.
Oh yeah.
Because that was more relevant than anything happening on the screen.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the game went on for 10 minutes longer than it needed to, really.
Oh, way longer than that. Yeah.
DFM were crushing it and then got cocky trying to close it twice.
Yeah.
And Aphelios is the thing with Crescendum Calibrum.
Yeah, and just stalls it out for so much. Oh, God. Oh, okay.
It never ended up there.
Well, gentlemen, we each got to the finals in very different ways, with different finalists, with different people winning the finals. Somehow, I still don't understand how we got different people winning the finals. I can't believe Initia1ise.
By the way, my less insane version had Sengoku winning, by the way, which is still whatever, but like...
My less insane has V3.
Yeah. But, yeah. I need to caveat that. But then, it's like one of these moments where I have a prophetic moment, and something descended into my room, and it wasn't Sam slapping me. It was an angel of Aria who said, "Yo, bitch, go support your boy."
Yeah, you can get them up to round 3. You can't have them win it unless you're going to double down and have already made that
I'm hoping for the KT Arrows experience and just they coin flip their way to a region win. That'd be so fucking cool.
I mean, at least
that'd be so cool.
I mean, okay, so we're gonna cover this far more once after playoffs have fully happened and everything. Yeah. But I'd like to just get our listeners that are now coming into us, as people might now be coming into our podcast, interested in our thoughts and everything. Because now we're hitting playoffs, this is where people will start seeking out English content for it, realistically. Now,
yeah,
gentlemen, what are our hopes for any team, regardless of who they are, going into Worlds? As we've already mentioned this before, but I think it's important that we start repeating ourselves a little bit now.
So it's worth noting, play-in stage has been expanded from previous previous years because there are extra seeds from China and from Europe. What that means is that you now have, instead of just like 2 top-tier regions with teams in the play-in stage, you now have 4th seed China, 4th seed Europe, 3rd seed Korea, 3rd seed North America, and then you also have like the 2nd seed from PCS and Vietnam instead of the 1st seeds there. And when you only have 4 qualifying from the play-in stage, which means that to get through as a wild card, you need to actually knock out one of the major region seeds. That is tough. So what you need to do is have an to be honest, what you really need to do is you need to upset your group and come into a point where you're not playing against one of the higher seeds. Just take a best of 1, get to the top of your group, and then win a best of 5 versus a weaker team. That's what I'm looking for from one of our LJL teams, to get through into groups. Because I'd love to see them in groups, but it has to happen in that way.
I also need teams to stick to their style.
DFM did not do that last year.
There is something about teams from lower tier regions coming in and trying to do what other regions do and just not doing it as well when they've been playing a different way the whole damn year. Sure. And that's not how you got to Worlds, and trying to change it at the last minute, you're going to be a pale imitation, and you are relying on pretty low odds at that point. If I see V3, for example, go, having been the best team in summer split by a long way, absolutely a very valid possibility.
But what happens if they just flip their style?
Yeah, exactly. And what I want to see is Boogie and Reiner looking to impact the map, have those strong 5 to 10 minute game plans, get me a Nidalee Thresh, and run over those those early game skirmishes. Like, that's the kind of thing I want to see.
Ironically, I think if it does come to a point where like you have to conform to the meta somewhat, I think Sengoku might be better at that. Because all the other teams have such a set way to play. Sengoku, like I said, the most evenly spread across the board. The main problem is top lane. If you try and force Afman off of comfortable things, he's gonna suck.
And exactly, there are other ways of doing it. Like, you could go to someone like CJ and just play for the chaos, where you drag people down your level, pull that Vitality 2018. There is something where you can do that. The other thing would be a team like, say, DFM or Sengoku at peak form, where they just look to play through a different lane to the other squad and just try and snowball at an opposite point on the map.
Yeah. I mean, an important part for a lot of us is that obviously any team that actually makes it out is actually the team that hopefully is able to qualify for groups. I think that's the minimum expectation and what we would all like for any of the LJL teams, right? Like, not getting out of groups is just a repeat fashion, right, for us at the LJL.
Look, it feels really crap, because the thing is, though, like, would I expect them to beat Korean 3rd seed if it's someone like Damwon or Genji or T1? Best of 5? Nah, you're not winning that. You're probably not beating Chinese 4th seed. So I sit there and I'm like, okay, I don't think they win that, but my hope and my aspirations for the LJL is to get themselves to a best of 5 point where they can actually win that best of 5, not versus one of these crazy teams. I'd love to see LJL make groups. Do I think it's going to happen? With the play-in stage the way it is this year, really difficult.
We will obviously be covering the group fully in depth.
Well, we'll see how we do that in terms of format, but we'll definitely
Yeah, we might
give
do
you
it
some content.
live, for instance, but
We'll
depending
do
on
some-
how
we'll
it
do some
happens.
content.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, the top 4 for the LPL at the minute would be Invictus Gaming at number 1, JD Gaming number 2, Fun Plus Phoenix, and Top Esports. So 4th seed
Oh,
would be
God.
Top Esports. You are asking Ace to go versus Night9. You are hoping.
That's why I'm like...
You are hoping that Pyrian, who went 0-9-2 and Oriana.
Man, why do PCS and Vietnam get a fucking buy into groups? Why don't we get that shit,
Because we've
man?
done shit internationally for forever. It really sucks.
Man, fucking DFM! God damn it!
I put this to you. I suspect NA's 3rd seed, EU's 3rd seed.
they'll be fucking
the LCK's
buys.
3rd seed
Sam,
would struggle versus
so-
Top Esports.
well,
Sorry,
this is the thing, so, like,
NA's is a buy.
So EU's 4th seed, so you're gonna, so your top 4 for EU right now, what? Mad Lions.
Well,
so Rogue,
currently
Mad
Rogue
Lions,
is already
GG2.
qualified for it, even if they bomb
Yeah.
out.
And SK.
So what- I
think.
SKNF's Fnatic isn't it 4th seed?
No, Fnatic are at 6th. Oh, no, they're 5th. I apologize. Hang on, wait,
something
wait.
like that. Okay. Yeah,
be
so
SK.
EU 4th seed,
Versus
you
Top
could
Esports.
deal with that.
Yeah.
You could deal with that. Yeah. Yeah.
Do we think an LJL team can beat Schalke?
I mean,
They
like,
can do.
I don't because
I
like,
think
if you
on their
look at-
current form.
well, like,
Hard
you know,
tell.
it's like, I will say that Schalke have been quite reliant on Gilius getting things started in the early game.
Oh, and if you have
and-
Boogie or
and if you've
Pyrian
got-
control,
yeah,
Blank controlling them, maybe
Boogie
not.
Blank, hell, Steel on the right champion. Is like these are smart junglers. They could definitely play that style. Having said that, you are then also looking at Abadagi at the minute, who has been really, really good in mid to late game situations, and that could be more of a worry.
I'm also totally fine if we have to place against this current version of Fnatic, by the way. I'm
I agree.
totally
Fnatic
okay
would
with this
disconnect enough that you
Fnatic.
could punish them. They're like, Fnatic
Oh,
need to
yeah.
snowball early.
Yeah.
They need someone to pop off and then they can follow them.
And
Fnatic
I'm-
this-
from an
yeah.
even or a
So
behind point
put it
don't
this
have
way,
anyone to
if
follow.
if you're going to beat the NA or EU seeds, I'd prefer someone like Sengoku v3DFM.
Yeah.
If you're going to take a game upset China Korea, you kind of need CGA.
You've got to index into the madness.
You
You've got to
kind of
play
need
with it.
CJ to coin flip that because you're not winning it
Yeah.
conventionally. So that's why I'm like, so I know that a couple of weeks ago I was like, who should represent the LJL? I'm like, if you want this year playing.
Casa?
Oh,
but Sam,
that's so
but,
rough.
but the thing is, though, like, I genuinely think that it's between Arya and DO1 who's the best emerging region mid laner. I think that currently Arya is playing. Oh no, DO1's been playing really, really well. Actually, thinking
He
about
has, but Deer One's got a more limited
it.
champion.
And he played Ari, so. You know.
Yeah, he did.
But then just imagine the current 4th seed is either Gen G or T1. And then just imagine that Arya has to try and beat BBD.
BDD,
Or Faker or Closer.
Yeah, exactly. That feels great, man. That just feels so good.
He has played against them in solo queue, but there's very difference playing it against it on stage. He is like top Korean challenger. Like he's reached top 100
he's
Korean
got the
challenger.
talent
He's got the talent there. The question for me would be like
The rest of the team.
Well, and the thing so actually, well, remember Gango beat SKT while he was on KT Rolster in 2018 when he was
true.
there, or 2019. He did actually take a series off of them when he was with KT Rolster, and I believe he did that with the Draven game actually. It's really
Of
difficult.
course he fucking did.
This is the problem, because like if CGA just do not give a damn about the situation and they don't let it go to their heads, because we kind of saw that from them in the series they lost to V3 last split. They lost their heads a bit. If they don't lose their heads, I think they have the highest ceiling of any LJL team. Just consistently, they wouldn't reach the same results because they're just as likely to lose a game to some random team.
So, Magical Christmas Land. We get through to groups. Are we all happy with making groups after that? We're like, whatever, it doesn't matter.
Oh, if we make groups, it's been hitting above our weight. I don't think we should make groups. I want us to.
I think we need a decent draw. Because I mean, if we end up with the LCK, if we end up with LCK or LPL, like we're in trouble, and that was always a room. If we can wrangle a win versus NA or EU, definitely doable. Then there is a world where we can do that. I think we can hit at weight with most other regions if we're playing it out there. But
So-
it's like those major regions are always going to be the weakness for any emerging region coming out.
And a big question for us is going to be, how do we stack up? More importantly, not even against the major three, and technically LCS, major three and America. where do we stand against the other emerging regions? Obviously, there is the PCS and Vietnam, who already have seeding straight into groups. And we already know some background information about where our teams currently stand against some of those teams. Where do we stand against, like, the Brazilian teams, the Turkish teams, Latin America? These are regions where they will randomly, one, get huge viewing numbers, and two, their teams look pretty solid in some spots, but also absolute potato fests.
So I've not really kept up with CBLOL OC this year.
No, neither have I.
I've kept on with PCS, VCS, because I know some of the people that cast them, right? So I've managed to chat with them, and I've done some VOD review of some of their things. It's also worth noting PCS, VCS is their second seed coming into group stage. That's important, because we're likely going to see Flash instead of Garm for VCS, which is a very stylistic different team. PCS, things are still up in the air, really.
Well, yeah, it's too early to count these,
yeah.
but...
So for me, it's really hard to judge CIS, which is Russia, because Unicorns of Love have smashed everyone.
Yeah.
And that's very hard to judge them because they might just be in a very weak region and be a strong team within it.
Yeah, it's basically...
Yeah. Go on.
It's like, but basically, Unicorns of Love have run over everyone, Gambit's run over everybody else.
Yeah,
But isn't it good for
say,
us to know where we are in standings currently? Because we didn't have MSI, and this is the LJL. We haven't power limited ourselves. Well, I haven't power tested ourselves really on an international stage since back in 2019, when DFM were the undisputed kings of the region still. And we've had spring where things went a little bit shaky for DFM, but they still would have represented us, with Sengoku rising up to the challenge. And now V3 rose up, Sengoku rose up, CGA rose up, DFM are rising back, with Burning Court and the Hawks on their tails, both making changes and both looking better than they did in their previous spring split. Where is our region's power level? Are we, like, absurdly good? Are we kind of Are we bad?
It's really hard to judge because we have an international stuff. If I were to put in my bet, I think that we are actually better than the PCS and the VCS at the top end. I think we are.
Wow.
I think that the thing which is really, really hurting VCS, and in some ways the PCS too, is lack of coaches. Really is lack of coaches. I think that they don't. So put it this way: one way that I judge good regions is how often does the correct draft win. So in my eyes, what they can do with their comp, how much does that win?
So NA.
So this is why I think NA is quite weak. I think NA is quite weak. I think that a lot of the time they don't understand how they are drafting, and when they have the drafts, what they can actually do at certain points in the game.
Sure.
So I think that VCS has incredibly talented individual players, probably more so than as a whole than the LJL. But they're playing stuff like Kha'Zix Galio and not using that combo until 25 minutes into the game. They're doing stuff like trying to play, finally try and play some. So we saw Cerberus versus Percent, which are probably the two heaviest macro teams in the VCS, play against each other on Sunday. And we were on the desk for that, which is why we read up and we saw it. They tried to play macro, very slow-paced game for the VCS, and they had a Kennen who could flank and try and do stuff. And he didn't pull the trigger for like 10 minutes.
Nope.
I'm looking at that kind of team and that kind of macro mentality. I'm like, honestly, that is such a... That's not a good measuring stick against the rest of the world. I think that the PCS similarly has had some moments where they have not been particularly good at recognizing what their compositions do, whereas the LJL, V3 know what they can do with their comps. Same with Sengoku, same with DFM when they have like these ideas cooked up.
Yeah.
CGA also know how to team fight
recently.
with their comps, even the Hawks. Right? I think the LJL as a whole, we are pretty much on the same page when we have a draft locked in.
Yeah. And like, I
I'd
will
agree.
say...
I think you're right.
Yeah, I will say the VCS as well has, largely from what I've seen, this is not the region where Gigabyte Marines originally came from. It's evolved a little now. It's not quite the same level of madness anymore. Gam
Because
being
Flash and Cerberus are in there.
Yeah, and Gam being something of an exception where they do like to kind of snowball early, but even then, they aren't being as absolutely nutty about it as they were, and they're also occasionally getting punished for indexing too hard into playing for early stuff.
And that's the thing, right? They had like a really
Flash.
good early game draft and then just got petered out in late game because they didn't build a team. They didn't draft a comp which could do anything past 25 minutes.
Exactly. So it's not even necessarily that we have to be as afraid of just a completely different style that really throws the LJL for a loop because they're trying to play too controlled. Because actually, I think a lot of times the LJL has quite strong early game plans at the minute. I think, generally speaking,
Particularly with
I feel
V3.
Like V3 have, and I think that's been a good thing for a lot of the league.
Well, and it's risen everybody's stats up.
Yeah,
Everything.
it's forced Sengoku to think about it.
Think about it.
DFM to think about it. Forced, think about how CGA been playing with their bot lane when they've been playing properly and not horrible weak side, But why would that happen?
I mean, a big thing for me is something that we started really kind of pushing for our region, and that is our KDA. And I know it's objective and everything else. Boogie and Reiner having that kind of KDA in a region, like we said, way back when it was like absurd and Boogie was leading everybody by like 10 or 9 something kills for a period of time. It was absurd until the next person, which I think was Showmaker. Like, do we actually just secretly have has our region just leveled up so much in between kind of starting that scale up in spring that we all saw it started to happen, and then with coaching staffs coming more in, we already saw a change for the Hawks, and I think something about that our region, we will aggressively buy coaching staff and put in more people. And
we've got some huge names this year. Huge names.
Does that mean that actually, like, externally from what we can see, because we don't get much scrim information, we don't get much of outside information outside of a little bit of hearsay here or there, is our region actually just significantly better than where we actually should be? Or are we actually just kind of blinded? And it's so hard to predict this, right? It's so hard.
Compared to our recognition on the international stage and how we've performed internationally, we have had a huge leap up in some areas of play, right? And again, I think I think a large part of it is just look at what we do with our drafts compared to last year when you had like DFM losing a huge 60-minute game to Isurus or whatever because they just drafted awfully and played kind of badly. Whereas this year, honestly, the worst draft loses, the better draft wins, and that is hotly contested. I think that's a big thing for the LJL.
Big time. That's great for putting it. And like we've also just like look at the coaches that are in the region now. We've got Xander and Sweet and Honor, and like the list goes on, and it's like it's one of those things that actually.
Well, Sengoku have mental game coaches and stuff. They're doing stuff that only NA and LCK started doing last year. Sengoku were like, okay, yeah, we need to buy a mental game coach. We need to get people like immediately having that support, 100% initialize.
Yeah, and that I think is actually showing some fruit now as well, which is pretty big.
True.
So like. That gives me some faith that we don't come into Worlds, get intimidated and capitulate our style, because it's not all in the heads of the players, it's in with the coaches who can give a little bit more guidance, and that gives me some hope.
Yeah. The other thing that I'm also very excited for our region in general is we are also getting more and more subs in. We're just getting more players on teams, just so we can have more availability. In general, like, it's not a bad thing in general. Burning Core, think about it. They have an esports advisor, life coach, and manager, and everything, life managers and stuff. Like, a lot of the teams we've previously talked about, minimum their infrastructure is about 3 or 4 people. Minimum. Yeah. Whereas you see some of these Vietnam teams, it's like, all right, the players, and there's a coach, and that's kind of it. And it's a little bit sad.
So from what I've talked about with the Vietnamese guys, and actually this would be really interesting to talk about because we're potentially planning on doing some shared content between regions and stuff because we think that'd be interesting.
Spooky.
Some stuff. We'll see. Well, again, nothing.
The veil being lifted and then we push it back down.
Yeah, sure. Well, we'll see what we can do. But so when I was talking to Everyday, Vinny, Yulway from the VCS English cast, they've been saying that. Well, I'm particularly Everyday because I talk to them quite a lot on VOD and stuff. He's saying that VCS in terms of like local salary, it's good for a Vietnamese person. It's not good if you're looking like elsewhere and stuff. There's rumors of players increasing their salary 30 to 40 times by moving to the LPL. That is absurd.
Yeah, of course.
Coaches,
and that's kind of meh to bad LPL salaries as well. Think about it, because they know what they're competing with.
Yeah, exactly. You've got like I think it was who's the guy? Is it Zeros, the guy which moved over to RPL? Something like that?
I think that's right.
Anyway, some stuff like that. So there's that stuff. Although, and so many players like shifted in and out of the VCS teams, and there's a lot of org weirdness because it's very hard for them to brand their products and stuff. Although basically buying into the league, it's very so. Team Secret bought into the league while another team left. I think it was Loki. They got kicked out for various things, and then it's just very, very cheap. The money isn't there yet to force a lot of the players to stay and build up structure. However, the server is the second largest in the world, and the throughput of players is very, very high, enough to support upcoming talent to replace people that would move on. So the VCS as a region is buoyed by individual talent, not necessarily infrastructure, which is helping them in any way, and I think that does cap their ceiling somewhat.
It's worth noting. It's worth noting as it will definitely be something that could affect.
I think.
Yeah. And then moving forward, what does that mean for the region as a whole? And where does that affect things? But as we an LJL podcast, first we
Gotta
will
go back
first,
to our base.
First, we've got to get to Worlds to then see who makes Worlds. We've all got our own crazy opinions for our pick'ems. And then we also have to then go through and believe in our team that does make it. And we'll give all of our content around that team. Certain bits here and there. Gentlemen, it's about time we round out this podcast with our questions of the week. Now, we've already kind of started talking about this. I've only got 2 questions in front of me. If anyone can double check the Discord just to
That'll be
verify.
it. That's it.
That's it. Okay.
Yeah.
So, we've got a name that I destroyed last time, and I believe it's Clancy.
Yes.
There you go.
Clancy17, who asked the question, who do you guys think could be a dark horse in this split playoff?
So that's the person we think that is like the outside chance of winning outside of conventional.
Or at least having
really.
a deep run, I think, is fair as also.
Yeah.
Favorites of V3, so that's not Dark Horse. It's someone else.
Yeah. I think I would say V3 are favorites. Sengoku Gaming are a good second shout because of their positioning and general play with the meta coming in.
Yeah, they just need to
I
win
think
2
you'll-
best of 5s.
yeah.
Yeah.
There is DFM of Historical Preston and maybe
It's-
thinking about their last form.
It's DFM
That-
or CGA, one of the two.
Yeah, I think CGA would be my dark.
Yeah, for me it's CGA because again they can just win anything or lose anything. I don't.
Yeah.
Pretty much in any given scenario, CGA are the dark horse. That's just the nature of their team.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
there's enough madness in there that they could change things around.
Yeah. Like
think-
it's believable. It's believable if you say CGA win anything. Like whereas like Burning Core or Hawks, it's not really.
I'm going to continue with my pick'ems and just go Burning Core, because if they coin flip their way through CGA, they could at least face against Sengoku. They're not going to win, by the way, against Sengoku, but they at least make 2-win run and they knock out DFM and Crest Gaming Act. That's just a thing, a narrative thing in and of itself where you're like, well, look at them now, lads. Look at them now.
I hope Burning Core have a chiropractor on like retainer because once his back is gonna be like
Absolutely
crooked
shattered.
by the time he's done hurt, like dragging the corpses of his rookies over the line.
Yeah. I think my
But
dark horse
I
would
think
be,
CGA is a correct one.
Yeah, it's just the nature of the team.
Yeah.
You can't because like Sengoku and V3 are good enough that they can't be considered dark horses. They are the favorites, quite clearly, I think.
Obviously, yeah.
And then it's literally just CGA or DFM. DFM, I don't have enough confidence in them, and I think, well, not right now.
Well,
I mean, I know.
I
Sengoku,
also,
like-
also you can't have
I can't-
DFM as it because of what Initialize has already said, right?
Yeah, like there's too much history. They were spring
Yeah,
split
true,
champions,
true.
and if they're back on form, like I can't call them a
Oh,
dark
yeah,
horse just
true.
because it's sort of saying like G2 or Fnatic are the dark horse. It's like really, like
Yeah, that's
they're
fair,
like,
that's fair.
are you entirely surprised? Would you actually be that shocked if like a squad like T1, DFM,
Just
whoever,
win, yeah.
just
Yeah.
win because they turn it on at the right time, like
No, I wouldn't.
there's
be.
not- yeah.
No. It's CGA. It's CGA, Clancy.
It's CJ, or you pick the Hawks and Burning Core and go, well, they'll make a deep run, but they won't win it. And I think that's
then-
the other way
yeah.
you have to look at
Yeah,
it.
like in fairness, I can also see CGA could well have cinched second and didn't because of a bad last week. There's a world that they're not actually the dark horse and it's Burning Core, and I might change my prediction actually to Burning Core. And I would say there is a world where
Yeah.
once
I mean,
and Ray Farkey
that-
pull off
that's-
the mother of all.
That's actually
runs.
interesting, because if CGA actually got the second seed, do you ever give Sengoku the dark horse? And I don't think I ever can give Sengoku a dark horse
Yeah.
pick.
So I think CGA or Burning Core are the right calls.
Look, put it this way: CJ, if they were first seed, would be the dark horse.
Yeah.
All right,
I
for you, sir, for you.
Yeah, like,
they're just like because they're never favorites to win. Honestly, they're like they're never out and out favorites. There's like if you put
and this is the team he wants to represent
Like
us.
I think CGA
Genuinely?
yeah, I have CGA down as the grey horse because they're not dark
Okay,
enough to be
alright,
a dark
alright,
horse. Right?
alright.
I think Burning Core are the dark.
Gandalf the Grey Horse. Yeah. Okay. All right. Wrap it up.
Oh, well, and I don't even know if I want to ask this question. So,
I put some serious thought into this, so you know.
all right. Well,
by the
you
way.
can say it out loud. It's not coming through my lips.
So, my fellow play-by-play caster and exceptional scholastic talent every day from the VCS has come up with a really important question for us here on the.
Why are we
Outlaw.
doing
Namely-
Scholastic's book fair? What?
and who would win in a fight, Nymaera or Yulwei? For the scenario, Yulwei has just said Ari is trash, and that's quite important.
I've got
because
betting
it means
odds for
that what
this,
you're
by
gonna
the way.
have is Nymaera in a rage. Like, watch now, watch his face right now. Maybe list him as well. Right, Ari is flat out trash. She is the worst waifu in League of Legends.
Say that again.
my point.
With that tone
So
and
with
voice,
this
I mean, all
situation
right.
of
Say
focus
that again.
rage, I believe that while
Wait, hang on,
Nymaera
wait.
does get a boost in stats at this point, he is also effectively under the influence of a taunt state. Think like, and that kind of means that as a result, he's quite.
Say that again.
There we go, exactly. And that means that while there is an increase in stats, there is also an unfortunate ability to outthink him. And Yulwei is a big brain player. And that means that his big wrinkly brain will allow him to overcome Nymaera, whose brain will have become so smoothed out by rage that he
You
won't
are
have a
forgetting
chance. And
something,
therefore, Yulwei will win.
He is a Soraka main. Does that end up changing your thoughts?
Order of the Banana always wins. Black Rose, bananas.
Yeah, Banana's a queen. Like, come on. Like,
Also,
heard it here
you
first.
can do covers of My Sharona, but replace the word Sharona with Soraka, and that immediately makes...
Soraka.
Exactly. So that's how it...
Yeah, the old 70s rock song, which like three people know.
And, you know, he's becoming a bit of a Lilia main too.
So
And that
I
means
wasn't
that he can send you into
sure-
a nightmarish sleep and play.
oh, are we doing Fight Club rules or not?
Good
do
question.
Do I get to have an epee?
No, you don't.
Do you get to have any weapons?
You get a waifu pillar.
Oh,
in that case,
well,
I
then
win
you
every time then,
smother
yeah.
him. That's a bit fucked up.
That's fair. That's possible.
Your
Yeah,
way
okay,
gets a
maybe
banana.
your way loses.
Nymaera gets a fucking giant body pillow. It's Nymaera, like 90-1, because just think about it. You
well, this is the
smother
problem,
him.
right? Then we have to revisit the very famous Monty Python sketch of how to defend yourself against people with various kinds of fruit.
Do you have a gun?
You shoot the person, you take the banana, and you have a healthy snack.
All right, your way. Come back to me with a way you defeat Nymaera with a gun.
Yeah, we
because
need
you've
a
been following Monty
response.
Python
We need a
rules.
response.
Yeah, so like
Obviously, I
we
can't
can't
defend
answer this
myself.
question as well as we could. I offered a situation. I've been proved that I might have some more things to consider. So you'll wait, get back to us. Tell us whether you are able to do with Nymaera with a gun.
Okay, any expansion? Nope, we're good.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for listening to the LJL Officially Unofficial Podcast. We always go a little bit off the rails here towards the end. We covered the matchup between CGA versus the Hawks. We also covered our thoughts regarding Detonation FocusMe facing off against Burning Core. We gave our predictions for how we think these maps are going to go, these matches will go, and also the scores we expect. We're all in unanimous agreement about Crest Gaming Act facing off against the Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks Gaming, but we all have very polarizing opinions on why we believe, who we believe will even win for Detonation FocusMe versus Burning Core. We hinted towards with our pick'ems who we believe will be winning V3 versus Sengoku, but we're going to be covering all of that in our next week's podcast, where we'll be covering everything for round 2 and then moving forward for the rest of it. Towards the end, we will also start talking about, when we have a week break, talking about the whole of the LJL summer split, as well as the playoffs up to that point. We've got a lot of content still, and just because it's playoffs doesn't mean we go slow. If anything, we've got more than ever to go for it. So now, Initia1ise and Nymaera. Initia1ise, you can go first, sir. Got any closing thoughts for yourself?
I am really looking forward to these playoffs. I think first time in a long time we've had a number of teams who legitimately are in with a shout of winning it, and our top 4, I wouldn't, if top 5 even, I would see a world where all of them could take the crown, and that's pretty awesome.
Nymaera?
Makes a lot of sense what Sam said, really. Playoffs are much closer than last split, where we did
we
kind of see it as like a two-horse race, really, and that's kind of what it ended up as. Yeah, this year, top 5, top 4, top whatever. Pretty much anyone can win. It's going to be very interesting for us trying to prep everything, because we don't get the easy job of saying, oh, we'll just prep this guy for the next round. That'll be fine. Nah, got to prep everything. Gonna be crazy. Join in.
We've got to prep it all. If you want to hear this podcast on other places, you can find it on all audio streaming platforms. You can also find all of our social medias, as well as this podcast goes on YouTube. You can find our social medias at MaskedSwan, at Initia1ise for the man in the middle, and at the man on the far left, at Nymaera. You can also find us all on LJL Officially Unofficial, or just LJL Unofficial, or LJL English. We do start popping up a little bit more often, as well as all of our games do go out onto our YouTube. So if you need to refresh yourself on anything before we go into playoffs, that's where you'll be able to find it. All as well as we do have our own Discord server and our Twitter, where we try and keep everybody up to date with how we are going to be covering things, as well as also just general chit chat and conversation. It's also where we ask questions for our podcast. But for myself, Initia1ise and Nymaera, thank you so much for listening and or watching, and we'll see you all very, very soon.